All right. Then just to round out our processes real quick, our setup processes. Just want you to be familiar with some of the list options that are available. First and foremost will be your products and services. This list controls what you're able to sell and what you're able to schedule for within the system. A product being a physical good or equipment or an asset, a service being a task that's actually performed by a human, not actually a physical product. For either one of those, you do need to tell us whether you sell this item to a customer or not. This controls whether it will go on the schedule and onto an invoice. So, for instance, if you for medical supplies for a Medicare agency, you probably have a product, but you don't actually sell those to your customers. You give them away, or they're included within your your clinical care process. If you're a DME company, though, you probably obviously do sell supplies or wheelchairs, etc. For a typical home health agency, you're obviously going to deal with a lot of services that are sold to customers. For instance, a skilled nursing evaluation visit and a skilled nursing routine visit. Items that would not, or services that would not be sold to customers would include things like staff training, orientation, meetings, interviews. All of those can be set up as a service that's not sold to a customer. So to briefly run through those options, the first thing you want to do is give your service or your product a name and a description. Assign it to a category. This category list, again, is controlled by your administration. If this item is sold to clients, then you are able to give us the income or the charge information. So attaching that to your what income account from your general ledger. So, for instance, if I was doing a physical therapy visit, that's probably going to be allocated to a charge account called service income, whether or not it's taxable, and then what your default invoice options are. What HCPCS code we use to bill this service under, the revenue code, what modifiers, what our default charge amount is, and how we calculate that charge amount. So for a Medicare home health agency, you're typically billing in 15-minute increments, even though you bill $1 amount regardless of the number of minutes utilized. For a private duty nursing agency or a therapy company, you're often billing in 60-minute increments or in 15-minute increments. And so you're able to control how we calculate the total charge amount for that claim. So to give just some quick examples, if you want to bill $150, but have the quantity calculate in 15-minute increments, like we would do for a Medicare PPS claim, these are the settings you would want to utilize. If you bill $150 per visit, then you would choose the visit option, so that regardless of how long your therapist is out in the home, we're always going to bill with a quantity of one. If we wanted to bill, let's say for a private duty nursing visit, most of the time that's going to be something like $15 per 15 minutes. And in that case, if I render an hour visit, we're actually going to bill $60 with a quantity of 4. So you're able to kind of control a lot of settings there, and you're also able to tell us how you want those rounded. For instance, some payers require us to round to the 10th of the hour or the 100th of an hour or to the nearest 15-minute increment. So you're able to control that as well. And then earlier when we talked about your fee schedule, you can also tell us what your expected reimbursement amount is. So in this case, if you get paid $12.50 per 15-minute increment, and you have that company setting for automatically posting contractual adjustments, for every unit that you bill, we will put in a bill transaction of $15, but we'll automatically put in a contractual adjustment of $2.50 so that your AR reflects the appropriate $12.50 balance. Now that is a default service price. Obviously, you may have fee schedules that are different per insurance company, and you'll set those up underneath this service pricing field. So for each of your insurance companies, you're able to set those same calculations. For instance, if you bill Blue Cross using S codes, but you bill Medicare using G codes, then you can set those on a per payer basis. Same charge amount, billing quantity calculations. But here you also have the capability of capping the quantity. For instance, some payers won't take visits that are longer than an hour. So even if your nurse happens to stay out at the home for an hour and 15 minutes, instead of having a 5-unit visit that's going to get denied, we can cap that quantity at 4. Every now and then you'll have payer contracts where they force you to actually set a quantity kind of in stone, regardless of how long the visit is. If that's the case, that's what this override quantity field is for. So if you wanted your quantity to always be a 3, regardless of the length of time someone's in the home, then you would set that field. These are very seldom used, but wanted you to be aware of what they were for. Reimbursement amount we've covered. And then you can also tell us whether a prior authorization is required before the service gets paid, and whether an order, a physician's order, is required. These 2 settings will control the warnings and errors that we give you when trying to schedule a visit outside of your authorization limits. And then to limit the service price to a payer, just choose that payer from the list. And you have a few other options as well. For instance, if you wanted to set up patient-specific pricing, instead of limiting to a payer, you can limit to a patient. And then you can also control when this fee schedule is active. So if a fee schedule is updated, you can always set the active date at the end of the year, at the end of your contract term, and add in the new rate, and the system will automatically take into account your active date ranges. All right, rounding out the rest of your service setup, you have the ability to control your expenses. Again, what GL general ledger account you want this expense allocated to. Your estimated average cost. So for cash flow purposes, we can utilize this average cost number when we don't have an employee with their payroll information. We can use this dollar amount as a pretty good guess as to what your cash flow or profitability would be. And then under advanced, whether you want this service to be included in payroll or not. For instance, you may not want to pay employees to attend a meeting or an interview, but you probably do want to pay them for skilled nursing visits. You can set up the default pay rate here, whether that's just their regular pay, or if it's a bonus that gets paid on top of what they normally get paid. You can kind of control that here. You also have the capability of controlling pay rates at the individual employee level. Whether this service counts toward an employee's maximum hours. At the employee level, you can control that an employee only wants to work 30 hours or 40 hours a week. If this is a service that shouldn't count toward that total, then you can just turn that off, and we want to include that in their calculation. You can control the default payroll department that this expense gets allocated to. You can also tell us a number of payroll points that should get calculated for this particular service. This is a more advanced feature for nursing agencies or therapy agencies. For instance, we until the visit's actually rendered, we may not know that it's going to take 3 hours. One visit may take an hour and a half, another visit may take 3.5 hours. So what we kind of do here is take an average of those and say if we schedule an admission visit, we're going to give our nurses 3 points. And then we calculate out that we want our schedulers to schedule employees up to 37 points a week. This gives you some more kind of an expanded capabilities for scheduling. So instead of treating a routine visit the same as an evaluation visit, we can give more points to the evaluation visit because we think it's going to take longer. So it just gives you kind of a more advanced scheduling capabilities. And then for those of you who really want to get into complex general ledger expense allocations, you do have the capability of saying any of our weekend bonuses get allocated out to a different payroll account. Any of the third shift weekend bonuses or holiday bonuses get paid out to a different expense account versus the regular pay. Just know if your accountant asks you, you have some pretty advanced capabilities there. Tracking, the main thing you'll need to worry about here is whether each of these visits requires a supervisor signature or not. This is primarily for our therapy companies. When you have a CODA or a PTA that has a requirement that their supervisor co-signs those notes, this allows us to send that note to the supervisor before it goes to billing. And then under the advanced section, if this is a point of care document, you want to choose the type of form that gets completed when this visit is scheduled. So for instance, if we're scheduling a candidate interview, you may want to use our internal candidate interview evaluation form. If you're scheduling a phone call, you may want to choose to complete the communication note. If this is a point of care visit for nursing, you would probably want to choose the skilled nursing document. So I'll let you guys look through that list of forms, but also know that you do have the ability to create your own custom forms within the software, and you can include those as the option as well. So you do have employee, patient, lead, provider, authorization, and service form types that you can create. And then if you wanted to limit this this service to a particular location, you can do that. Whether you want to complete care validation on this visit, and based upon if you do want these notes going into care validation before they go to the billing process, you can actually control how many of those visits. For instance, if you want to randomly select 10% of your visits to go to care validation, then we can do that. Or if you want all of your new hires to have their documentation turned in, then you have that capability as well. Once that visit gets turned in and validated, if you want us to bill that claim or that charge, then you'll want to set the status to confirmed. If this is a service that automatically gets written off, you would want to choose revenue adjustment or uncollectible. Revenue adjustment would be something like like when you visit a patient in the hospital before they're admitted to service for maybe a meet and greet visit, one that you want to pay your nurse for but you don't want to ever bill for, or maybe an interview or a case conference. Again, one you may want to put into payroll, you want to put it on your schedule, but you're never going to bill for that service. Then you would just choose one of these two write-off options. Revenue adjustment, meaning we never anticipate billing for that particular service. uncollectible, meaning we do anticipate billing for it, but for some reason we can't. Maybe there's no order, no authorization. And then whether the service is active or discontinued or on hold. And if you want to limit this service to a specific job title. So for instance, any nursing visits we may want to limit to our RNs and LVNs, so that we can't schedule a physical therapist to receive this particular service.